You know what's shocking? The biggest leaders today are making headlines, but no one's telling you the real story behind their words. We're not just filling your screen with noise. We're breaking it down, what they said, what they meant, and why it matters to you. Let's get started. They say time moves faster as you grow older, but have you noticed how the nights seem longer? You lie there in the quiet, staring at the ceiling, the world asleep. But your mind's still racing. Thoughts drift between memories and regrets. A conversation you should have had. A mistake you wish you hadn't made. Or maybe just that dull ache in your chest that seems to echo louder when everything else is silent. And in those moments, sleep feels like a distant dream. This story begins with someone like you. His name was Walter. He was 67, retired, soft-spoken, and lived in a small town just outside of Ohio. He had worked most of his life fixing people's heating systems. Never asked for much, always showed up when called. People respected him, even if they didn't always notice him. But after his wife passed, something changed. Walter began sleeping less. Not by choice, but by worry. Not dramatic panic, just a low, constant throb of anxiety that followed him into the night. His heart would beat a little faster than it should. His thoughts would wander, and when sleep finally came, it was shallow, restless, like drifting in and out of a dream. You couldn't quite hold on to. Doctors said his heart was tired. But Walter, he just felt lonely. He wasn't sick. He wasn't dying. He was simply aging, and no one had really prepared him for how quietly heavy that can feel. Walter didn't just feel better. He began to live differently. Mornings felt less heavy. The silence in his home didn't echo as loudly as before. And that dull ache in his chest, it didn't vanish overnight, but it softened, like an old wound that had finally been acknowledged. He began walking a little more. Not for exercise, but for presence. For the feel of wind on his face. For the sound of birds in the trees. For noticing the world again, instead of hiding from it. And every night, without fail, he'd sit by his window, breathe 5 slow breaths, and whisper 3 small thanks into the quiet. One evening, his grandson stayed over, a bright-eyed 12-year-old who never stopped asking questions. And when bedtime came, Walter showed him the breathing trick. The boy giggled at first, said it was weird. But the next morning, he said he slept better than ever. Walter just smiled, not because he fixed anything, but because something small, something quiet, had been passed on. You see, these aren't just sleep tricks. They're rituals of remembrance. They're how we remind the body, you're not alone. You don't need to be perfect. You're allowed to rest. And in a world that demands so much, giving yourself even 5 minutes of peace is an act of quiet rebellion. You're telling your nervous system, you've done enough. You're telling your soul, you're still whole. And you're telling the night, I trust you to carry me. Walter never became famous. Never wrote a book. Never gave a TED Talk. But he left behind something far more important. A rhythm. A reminder. A way to soften the weight we carry into sleep. So tonight, just try 5 breaths, 3 thanks, no pressure, no expectations, just presence. Because peace begins with a whisper. And your heart? It's listening! Years passed. Seasons turned. And the house where Walter once lived grew quiet again. But the habit, that gentle ritual of breath and gratitude, didn't die with him. His grandson, now a man with tired eyes and a racing mind, still practiced it. Through heartbreaks, job losses, long nights with crying babies, he always returned to it. 5 slow breaths, 3 simple thanks, sometimes whispered into the night, sometimes just felt deep in the chest. And he taught it to others, not by lecturing, but by living, by being the kind of person who listened deeply, laughed easily, and knew how to sit still in silence. His daughter once asked him, "Why do you always breathe like that before bed?" And he smiled, not to teach, but to remember. Because some wisdom isn't shouted. It's passed down in silence. It lives in moments, in stillness, in the space between thoughts. And maybe that's what we've forgotten in our fast, flashing world. That healing isn't always loud. That sleep isn't something to chase. That peace doesn't have to be earned. Sometimes, it only asks to be allowed. So tonight, when the noise quiets and your screen finally dims, give yourself that tiny gift. Close your eyes. Inhale through your nose. Feel your chest rise. Exhale slowly through your mouth. Let your shoulders drop. And with each breath, remind yourself, you are safe. You are enough. You are still here. Then say 3 small things. Not because everything is perfect, but because even now, even in the messy, uncertain, human space you inhabit, there is something worth noticing. Maybe it's the softness of your pillow. Maybe it's the fact that, somehow, you made it through another day. Or maybe it's simply this: that you remembered to breathe, to be, to rest. And that, dear listener, is where true peace begins. But what if this becomes more than just a bedtime habit? What if it becomes a quiet revolution in how you treat yourself? Because here's the truth no one told us. You are still allowed to begin again. Even at 60, even at 70, even when your hands are tired and your memories are heavy, especially then, you're allowed to redefine what rest means. You're allowed to say, I don't want chaos in my evenings anymore. You're allowed to choose softness over speed, peace over performance. This isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's knowing that a quiet room and a steady breath can do more healing than 100 rushed conversations or a bottle of sleeping pills. Walter didn't become a different man overnight. He didn't join a program or follow a strict plan. He just chose presence, one evening at a time. And the ripple effects, he started remembering more dreams. He began writing small notes to himself in the morning. Thoughts, quotes, gentle reminders. He smiled more. He walked a little slower, but with more awareness. He became more available to his grandson, more forgiving of his past. All because sleep was no longer a battleground. It was a sanctuary. You might be wondering, will this really work for me? Maybe your mind is louder than Walter's. Maybe your nights are filled with pain, or racing thoughts, or a loneliness that feels endless. But you don't have to fix everything tonight. You only need to start a new conversation. Start with 5 breaths. Let each one say, I'm here. I'm safe. I'm letting go. Start with 3 thanks. Let them be. I made it through the day. I still have breath. I'm trying. That's enough. Because healing doesn't come from doing more. It comes from surrendering more gently. And when you learn to trust your nights, even a little, your days begin to change too. Walter once stood on his porch just before sunrise. He was holding his cup of tea, wrapped in a scarf knitted by his late wife. The air was cool. The sky was soft with light. And he whispered something to no one in particular. I used to dread the silence. Now, I think it's where I meet myself again. That is the gift. The silence isn't empty. It's full of messages from your soul. And every night you greet it, not with fear, but with grace. You reclaim a part of yourself. So tonight, again, not perfectly, just sincerely, let your breath speak what words can't. Let your thanks become your lullaby. And let sleep come, not as a stranger, but as a friend returning home. Because you, yes, even now, are still worthy of peace. Still capable of healing. Still allowed to rest